My friends, we live in a world where light and darkness are in constant battle. The forces of good and evil are not just distant ideas, they are working right now in the hearts of men and women. There are those who walk in the light of truth, humility, and love, but there are also those who have given themselves over to darkness, deception, to the sin of self-worship. And when a person surrenders to the grip of narcissism, when they reject the truth and embrace the lie, they sell their soul to the very forces that seek to destroy them. There are signs, clear warnings, that reveal when a person has crossed the line, when they have abandoned the call of conscience and given themselves to the shadows. One of the first signs is a hardened heart. Once they may have felt the sting of guilt, the whisper of conviction, the call to repentance. But now they mock the truth. They justify their actions. They no longer feel remorse for the pain they cause. The light that once flickered in their soul is dimmed. And in its place is only pride, arrogance, and self-exaltation. The second sign is deception. Not only do they lie to others, but they lie to themselves. They twist reality to fit their desires. They rewrite history, manipulate facts, and gaslight those around them. The truth becomes their enemy because the truth exposes them. And so they embrace darkness over light because the darkness hides their deeds. A third sign is a lack of love. The Bible tells us that love is patient, love is kind, love does not boast, it is not proud. But the narcissist who has fully surrendered to darkness loves only one thing: themselves. They use others, discard them, and move on without a second thought. They see people as tools, not as souls. And without love, they become empty shells, walking in the flesh but dead in the spirit. The fourth sign is an insatiable hunger for power and control. They cannot stand to be wrong. They cannot tolerate those who challenge them. They demand worship, loyalty, and obedience, not because they seek to serve, but because they seek to rule. And when someone refuses to bow, they seek to destroy. Their words are like swords, their actions like poison, and their hearts are filled with envy, rage, and bitterness. The final sign is their war against God Himself. They may claim to be spiritual, they may pretend to be righteous, but in their hearts they have rejected the authority of the Lord. They do not seek His will, they do not humble themselves before Him. Instead, they elevate themselves to His throne. They believe they are the center of the universe, and they worship the idol of self. But the Bible tells us pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. No one can mock God and escape the consequences forever. The good news, my friends, is that there is still hope. There is a way back. No soul is beyond redemption if it turns from darkness and surrenders to the light of Christ. But for those who refuse, who harden their hearts, who love their sin more than salvation, the day will come when they will stand before the one they have rejected. And on that day, no lie, no manipulation, no power will save them. Only the truth will remain. A hardened heart. The narcissist loses the ability to feel guilt or remorse, justifying their actions and rejecting the truth. Deception and lies, they deceive not only others, but also themselves, twisting reality to fit their desires and avoiding accountability. Absence of love, true love is replaced by selfishness. They use and discard people without empathy or care. Hunger for power and control. They demand loyalty and worship, despising those who challenge them and seeking to dominate others. Rejection of God, they elevate themselves above God, resisting His authority and embracing self-worship. The possibility of redemption. Despite their darkness, hope remains if they choose to turn back to God. But destruction awaits those who persist in their ways. The hardened heart is one of the clearest signs that a person has sold their soul to darkness. It does not happen all at once. It is a slow process, a gradual numbing of the conscience, a quiet turning away from truth until one day the heart is like stone, unmoved, unfeeling, unreachable. The Bible warns of this condition time and time again, for a hardened heart is the breeding ground for sin, rebellion, and destruction. When a person no longer feels the sting of conviction, when they can justify even the most wicked actions, they have allowed darkness to take root in their soul. At one time, they may have felt the whisper of guilt, the gentle nudge of conscience, calling them back to righteousness. But little by little they ignored it. At first there was hesitation, perhaps a moment of doubt, a flicker of regret. But pride crept in. Pride whispered, "You don't need to listen to that. You are right. You are justified." And so they silenced the voice of truth. The more they ignored it, the quieter it became, until one day they could no longer hear it at all. What once was a heart sensitive to right and wrong becomes cold, calculating, immune to the cries of those they have hurt. The hardened heart refuses correction. When confronted with their actions, they do not reflect, they do not repent. Instead, they become defensive, angry, even cruel. They lash out at those who speak truth. They twist words, shift blame, create elaborate justifications to avoid facing their own guilt. A person who still has a tender heart, even if they have strayed, will feel the weight of their mistakes. They will wrestle with conviction. But the one who has given themselves fully to darkness has no such struggle. They are convinced they are above reproach, untouchable by judgment. This condition leads to arrogance. They look down on others with disdain, seeing themselves as superior. They mock humility, viewing kindness as weakness. They may disguise their contempt under a false mask of charm, but beneath it lies a spirit that refuses to bend, refuses to acknowledge any fault. They see themselves as the center of the universe, their desires as the ultimate authority. They do not consider how their actions affect others, for their heart no longer beats with compassion or empathy. A hardened heart also becomes indifferent to suffering. Where once there may have been sympathy, now there is only cold detachment. They can witness pain, betrayal, or destruction and feel nothing. They do not weep for the broken. They do not mourn for the lost. Instead, they move forward with callous disregard, untouched consequences of their actions. They may even take pleasure in the suffering of others, seeing it as proof of their own power. This is the path of Pharaoh in the days of Moses. Time and time again, he was given the chance to repent, to release the Israelites, to turn from his ways. But every time, he hardened his heart. Every time, he refused to listen. And in the end, his heart became so rigid, so unyielding, that destruction was inevitable. He was beyond persuasion, beyond reason, beyond mercy. This is what happens to those who choose to shut out the truth, who refuse to listen to the voice of God. The deeper they sink into their pride and self-worship, the less capable they become of ever turning back. But this path does not just destroy others, it destroys the person themselves. A hardened heart leads to an empty soul, a life devoid of true peace, true joy, true fulfillment. They may gain power, wealth, admiration, but none of it will satisfy. They will be restless, constantly seeking more, but never finding contentment. They will believe they are in control, but in truth they are enslaved to their own pride, their own sin, their own darkness. There is no reasoning with a hardened heart. No logic, no pleading, no evidence will reach them. The only thing that can break through such darkness is divine intervention, the mercy of God breaking through where all else has failed. But until that moment comes, they will continue down their path, blind to their own destruction, deaf to the truth, convinced of their own righteousness even as they walk deeper into the abyss. Deception is one of the clearest marks of a soul that is surrendered to darkness. It begins with small lies, subtle distortions of reality, a quiet reshaping of the truth to serve one's own interests. At first, these lies may seem harmless, even justified. But over time, they grow, they multiply, they take on a life of their own. What was once an occasional bending of the truth becomes a habitual rewriting of reality, a carefully constructed web of deception in which the person themselves becomes trapped. A person who has fully embraced narcissism does not just deceive others, they deceive themselves. They begin to believe their own lies. They reconstruct the past to fit their narrative, twisting events, rewriting history, casting themselves as the hero and others as the villains. If confronted with the truth, they will deny it with such conviction that even those closest to them may begin to doubt their own memories. They manipulate, gaslight, and distort reality, until it serves their agenda. And they do so with such confidence that those around them are left questioning what is real. This deception is not merely a tactic, it becomes their way of life. The truth is no longer something they seek, but something they fear. The truth exposes, the truth convicts, the truth calls for change, and they will do anything to avoid it. They build a false self, an illusion of perfection, an image carefully curated to maintain control. This false self is what they present to the world, but beneath it lies insecurity, fear, and emptiness. Yet, instead of facing these inner struggles, they bury them beneath layers of deception, convincing even themselves that the lie is reality. Their words become tools of manipulation rather than vessels of honesty. They say whatever is necessary to get what they want. They promise loyalty while plotting betrayal. They feign kindness while harboring selfish motives. They twist facts to suit their desires, taking words out of context, omitting key details, and framing themselves as victims when they are the ones inflicting harm. The narcissist who has given themselves over to darkness does not see honesty as a virtue, but as a weakness. They believe that power comes not from truth, but from controlling the perception of truth. Their lies extend beyond words. They live a life of contradiction. They may claim to value integrity while engaging in deceit. They may speak of love while treating others as disposable. They may project an image of righteousness while secretly indulging in sin. But the most dangerous deception is not what they tell others, it is what they tell themselves. They convince themselves that they are good, that they are justified, that their actions are necessary. They drown out the voice of conviction, suppress their conscience, and silence any inner doubts that might call them to repentance. This self-deception allows them to continue down their dark path without hesitation. If they were to admit the truth, they would have to face the weight of their own guilt, the reality of their actions, the damage they have caused. But instead of seeking redemption, they choose to deepen their delusion. They surround themselves with those who reinforce their lies, pushing away anyone who dares to challenge them. They create an echo chamber of deception, ensuring that the truth remains distant and unreachable. But deception is a fragile foundation. No matter how carefully it is constructed, no matter how deeply they believe their own lies, the truth remains unchanged. Reality cannot be rewritten forever. One day, the weight of deception becomes too heavy, and the carefully built illusion begins to crack. When the lies can no longer hold, when the truth comes rushing in like a flood, they will be left with nothing but the consequences of their deceit. And in that moment, they will see that deception, no matter how powerful it seemed, was never a shield but a prison of their own making. Love is the foundation of all that is good. It is the force that binds humanity together, the light that guides people toward kindness, compassion, and selflessness. But when a person has surrendered their soul to darkness, love is the first thing to die within them. What remains is a hollow imitation, a counterfeit version of love that is rooted in selfishness, manipulation, and control. They do not love in the way that love was meant to be expressed. Instead, they see love as a tool to use, a means to an end, something to serve their own desires rather than to give freely to others. At the core of a narcissist's lack of love is their inability to see others as valuable in their own right. To them, people are not souls with feelings, hopes, and dreams. They are objects, instruments to be used for personal gain. They love only when it benefits them, only when it serves their ego, only when it brings them admiration, loyalty, or attention. The moment that love requires sacrifice, patience, or genuine care, they withdraw it. Their love is conditional, fleeting, and insincere. In their relationships, whether romantic, familial, or friendships, they demand love, but do not return it. They crave affection, adoration, and attention, yet they are incapable of giving these things in return. If they express kindness, it is only to maintain control. If they show affection, it is often calculated, designed to keep someone within their grasp. Their love is not selfless, it is transactional. They do not love for love's sake, but for what it can provide them. Empathy, the ability to feel the pain of others and respond with compassion, is absent in them. Where there should be tenderness, there is coldness. Where there should be comfort, there is indifference. They witness suffering and remain unmoved. They see others in need and feel no urge to help. If they do offer assistance, it is not out of genuine concern, but to appear generous, to gain something in return, or to reinforce their own self-image. They do not see people as fellow human beings deserving of care and kindness. They see them as resources to be exploited. This lack of love is most evident when others no longer serve their purpose. A person who truly loves remains loyal in difficult times, patient in hardship, and forgiving in failure. But the narcissist, whose heart is void of true love, discards people as soon as they are no longer useful. The moment admiration fades, the instant loyalty wavers. The second someone challenges them or sets boundaries, they turn cold. There is no depth to their affection, no endurance in their devotion. They walk away without remorse, leaving a trail of broken hearts, wounded souls, and betrayed trust in their wake. The absence of love leads them to inflict pain without hesitation. They use words as weapons, dotting honors down with criticism, insults, and humiliation. They manipulate emotions, making others feel unworthy, small, and powerless. Instead of lifting people up, they push them down. Instead of bringing joy, they spread misery. And yet in their delusion, they do not see themselves as unloving. They may claim to love deeply, but their actions reveal the truth. Love is not measured by words, but by deeds, and their deeds speak of a heart devoid of warmth, mercy, and kindness. A life without love is an empty life. Those who abandon love in favor of selfishness may gain power, influence, and control, but they lose the very thing that makes life meaningful. They may have people around them, but they do not truly connect. They may receive admiration, but they do not experience genuine affection. Their world becomes a cold, lonely place where relationships are shallow, interactions are strategic, and true joy is forever out of reach. They have rejected the greatest gift, the ability to love and be loved in return, and in doing so, they have chosen a path of isolation, emptiness, and darkness. The hunger for power and control is one of the clearest signs that a person has given themselves over to darkness. It is not the desire to lead with wisdom or to guide with humility. It is the relentless thirst to dominate, to bend others to their will, to stand above all without question or opposition. It is the belief that their way is the only way, that they alone deserve obedience, that their desires must take precedence over everything else. This hunger consumes them, shaping every decision, every interaction, every relationship. At first, this desire for control may appear subtle. It may come in the form of persuasion, a quiet but persistent push to influence others. They may use charm, intelligence, or even kindness to draw people in, making them believe that submission is a choice rather than a demand. But over time, this need for control grows stronger, more blatant, more aggressive. They do not seek agreement through reason, they seek compliance through manipulation. They do not allow for independent thought. They expect unquestioning obedience. Any resistance is met with anger, with punishment, with calculated efforts to break the will of those who dare to challenge them. Their relationships are not built on mutual respect, but on dominance. They do not see people as equals, but as subjects, as pieces on a chessboard, to be moved and sacrificed as needed. They demand loyalty but give none in return. They expect devotion but offer no security. They use fear, guilt, and shame to maintain control, creating an atmosphere where others are too afraid to speak, too afraid to act, too afraid to lead. Their power is not built on love or trust, but on intimidation and manipulation. When they cannot control directly, they control indirectly. They twist words, distort reality, and create confusion. They play the victim when it suits them, shifting blame, rewriting events, making others question their own perceptions. They gaslight, making people doubt their own memories, their own emotions, their own sense of truth. They plant seeds of division, turning friends against each other, isolating those who see through their deception, ensuring that no one is strong enough to stand against them. This hunger for power extends beyond personal relationships. It shapes the way they move through the world. In the workplace, they climb the ladder not through integrity, but through cunning. They sabotage, they undermine, they eliminate threats with cold precision. Social circles, they seek influence, needing to be the center of attention, the authority on all things. If they are not leading, they are dissatisfied. If they are not in control, they are restless. To them, power is not a tool, it is an obsession, a necessity, an addiction. When their control is threatened, swift and severe. They cannot tolerate defiance. They view independence as betrayal. Those who challenge them are punished, discarded, or destroyed. They retaliate with cruelty, using words as weapons, exploiting weaknesses, striking where it hurts the most. They do not seek reconciliation, they seek submission. They do not seek understanding, they seek domination. Their ego cannot withstand the idea that someone else might be right, that someone else might have power, that someone else might refuse to bow. But no amount of control is ever enough. No matter how much power they gain, no matter how many people they subjugate, they remain unsatisfied. Their need for dominance is a bottomless pit, a hunger that can never be filled. And in their quest for power, they lose the very things that bring meaning to life: love, peace, joy, and true connection. They believe they are in control, but in truth, they are enslaved by their own insatiable desire. What they seek to possess ultimately possesses them, and the very power they crave becomes the chains that bind them to darkness. Rejection of God is the ultimate step in a person's descent into darkness. It is not merely an absence of belief, not just doubt or struggle, but an intentional turning away, a willful defiance and declaration that they will not be ruled by anything or anyone beyond themselves. They do not seek truth. They seek to redefine it. They do not submit to divine authority. They attempt to replace it with their own. In their minds, they are not accountable to God, to moral law, or to anything greater than their own desires. They exalt themselves, believing they are the masters of their fate, the ultimate judges of right and wrong. At first, this rejection may be subtle. They may claim to respect faith, to acknowledge a higher power, to admire the principles of morality. But beneath the surface, there is no true reverence, no humility, no recognition of their need for grace. They do not seek wisdom from God. They trust only in their own intellect. They do not humble themselves in prayer. They demand that life bend to their will. They see surrender to God not as a path to freedom, but as a sign of weakness. They do not want to be led, they want to lead. They do not want to worship, they want to be worshiped. They create their own morality, shaping right and wrong to fit their convenience. Instead of aligning themselves with truth, they twist truth to align with their desires. If something benefits them, it is good. If something hinders them, it is bad. Their conscience, once a guide, becomes a distant voice they no longer hear. They justify their actions, no matter how cruel, no matter how destructive. They claim there is no higher judge, no eternal consequences, no need for redemption. They are their own gods, accountable to no one. Their pride blinds them. They look at faith with contempt, viewing believers as naive, as weak, as foolish. They scoff at the idea of divine authority, seeing it as a threat to their own power. They dismiss Scripture, ignoring the wisdom of ages in favor of their own fleeting opinions. If they do speak of God, it is often to twist His words, to use them for their own advantage, to manipulate others rather than to seek truth. They do not seek a relationship with God, they seek to use the idea of God for their own gain. The absence of God in their lives creates a void, but instead of filling it with faith, they fill it with idols, money, status, influence, pleasure. They chase fulfillment in things that can never satisfy, yet they refuse to turn back to the one source of true peace. They feel the emptiness, but they suppress it. They experience the consequences of their actions, but they deny them. They harden their hearts, refusing to acknowledge their need for something greater. And as they drift further from God, they become more entrenched in their ways, more resistant to truth, more enslaved by the very things they once sought to control. Their rejection of God is not just a personal choice, it has consequences. Without God as their foundation, they lack true love, true compassion, true purpose. They may appear successful, powerful, even admired, but inside they are restless, unstable, unfulfilled. They may surround themselves with people, but they are isolated. They may gain everything the world offers, but they lose what truly matters. They convince themselves that they are free, yet they are bound by their own arrogance, their own deception, their own sin. And in their attempt to rise above God, they ultimately fall deeper into the darkness they have chosen. No soul is beyond redemption, but redemption requires a choice. The one who has given themselves over to darkness may have walked far from the light, may have hardened their heart, may have rejected truth. But as long as they still draw breath, there remains a path back. Yet the tragedy is that most who walk this road do not see their need for redemption. They do not seek to change. They do not believe they are lost. They see no reason to turn back, and so they continue deeper into the pit, further from hope, further from the grace that still waits for them. The possibility of redemption is always present, but it is never forced upon anyone. The offer of salvation is extended, but it must be accepted. To turn back from darkness requires humility, and humility is the one thing the narcissists resist most of all. They would have to admit their faults, acknowledge their wrongs, confess that they are not as powerful, as righteous, as untouchable as they once believed. They would have to face the wreckage they have left behind, the people they have hurt, the lies they have told themselves. They would have to let go of their pride, and for many that is a price too high to pay. True redemption is not merely saying the right words, not merely performing acts of goodness to cover up past sins. It is a transformation of the heart. It is a breaking of the old self, a surrendering to something greater. It is a turning away from darkness, not just in appearance, but in truth. The narcissist who has lived in deception for so long must first be willing to see themselves as they truly are, not as they have convinced themselves they are, not as they want others to see them, but as they are in the eyes of God. And that truth is often unbearable. To walk the path of redemption, they must abandon the hunger for control. They must release the need to dominate, to manipulate, to force their will upon others. They must stop viewing people as objects, as tools for their own gain, and instead learn what it means to love selflessly. They must unlearn the habits of a lifetime, the habits of deceit, of arrogance, of selfish ambition. They must open their heart to conviction, to correction, to the pain of guilt, not as something to be avoided, but as something that leads to change. The road back is not easy. The longer one has lived in darkness, the more difficult it is to step into the light. The lies they have told must be undone. The relationships they have broken must be repaired. The patterns of manipulation and self-deception must be stripped away. It is not a comfortable process. It requires suffering. The suffering of facing one's own failures, the suffering of rebuilding what has been destroyed. But that suffering is not meaningless. It is the refining fire that purifies the soul, that brings healing where there was once only destruction. For those who refuse redemption, there is only one end. No matter how powerful they seem, no matter how much they gain, darkness always consumes those who serve it. The weight of their own deception crushes them. The emptiness of their existence becomes unbearable. They may deny it for a time, may surround themselves with distractions, with noise, with every pleasure the world can offer, but in the quiet moments, in the stillness, the truth lingers. Without redemption, all roads lead to ruin. Yet, even in the final hour, the choice remains. No soul is so far gone that it cannot be saved. No heart is so hardened that it cannot be softened. But the decision is theirs alone. Grace stands at the door and knocks, but it will not force itself in. The hands of mercy remain extended, but they must be taken willingly. The path of redemption is open, but only to those who choose to walk it. The journey of the soul is shaped by the choices a person makes, by the road they walk, by the voices they listen to. No one falls into darkness overnight. It is a slow descent, a series of decisions, a pattern of small compromises that build upon each other. A person does not wake up one day and find their heart empty of love, their life filled with lies, their soul consumed by the hunger for control. It happens gradually, step by step, until one day they look back and see how far they have wandered from the light. Yet, even as they continue down that path, they convince themselves that they are in control. They tell themselves they are free, that they are strong, that they are untouchable. They do not see the chains tightening around them. They do not see the destruction left in their wake. They do not hear the warnings, the gentle calls to turn back, the quiet moments where truth still tries to reach them. They silence their conscience, drown out the voices of reason, reject the hand that reaches for them. They do not realize that the further they go, the harder it becomes to return. But the soul was not made for darkness. It was not created to live in deception, in selfishness, in emptiness. No matter how much a person convinces themselves otherwise, they cannot escape the truth written into the very fabric of their being. A life without love is a life without meaning. A life built on lies is a life without peace. A heart consumed by power and control is a heart that will never know true joy. They may have everything the world offers: wealth, influence, admiration, but none of it will ever fill the void within them. The tragedy of the soul lost to darkness is not that it could not have been saved, it is that it chose not to be. The warnings were there. The moments of conviction, the opportunities to change, the people who reached out in love, all of it was given. And all of it was rejected. Not because salvation was impossible, but because pride would not allow it. The heart that refuses to bend will eventually break. The mind that refuses truth will eventually collapse under the weight of its own delusions. The person who rejects redemption will eventually find that they have rejected the very thing that could have made them whole. But for those who still have breath, for those who still hear the call, the door is not yet closed. No matter how far they have gone, no matter how much they have done, no matter how hardened their heart has become, there is still a way back. It is not an easy path. It requires humility. It requires confession. It requires a willingness to be broken in order to be made whole. It means facing the truth, acknowledging the pain they have caused, surrendering the pride that has kept them trapped. It means choosing love over control, truth over deception, God over self. Many will refuse. Many will hear these words and turn away, unwilling to let go of the life they have built, unwilling to admit that they were wrong. But some will listen. Some will pause. Some will feel the weight of conviction stirring within them, calling them to something more. And for those few, the ones who are willing to take the first step, there is hope. The darkness does not have to be the end of their story. The chains do not have to remain. The soul that has been lost can still be found. But the choice is theirs, and theirs alone.